I am Dr. Madison Cole, a pediatric neurosurgeon at the Stanford Children's Hospital in San Francisco, California. On a cold Tuesday in March, I stood under the sharp white lights of OR 4, staring at the monitor that displayed the brain scan of a 9-year-old boy. A dark shadow pressed against his motor cortex, a blood clot large enough to paralyze him if I hesitated for even a moment. The anesthesiologist gave me a nod, and the nurse adjusted the suction. Everything was ready. I had done hundreds of brain surgeries in my career, but that morning, something in the air felt different, tense, almost prophetic. The OR doors opened with a soft hiss. I didn't turn, not right away. The circulating nurse whispered something about observers joining the procedure, hospital leadership, donors, and board members. It wasn't unusual, but when I finally glanced through the glass wall, my breath caught. There she was, Victoria Hale, elegant as ever, her silver hair pinned neatly, diamonds glittering beneath her surgical cap. The same woman who had once destroyed my life stood just a few feet away, separated from me by a single wall of glass. For 9 years, I had lived with the belief that my baby had died. Victoria Hale was the one who had looked me in the eye and told me so. Back then, I was a 26-year-old resident, madly in love with her son, Ethan. We were young, broke, and happy in our tiny apartment in Palo Alto. We talked about the future, a house with a black door in New York, 2 dogs, and maybe, one day, a family. That family came sooner than expected. I found out I was pregnant in my 3rd year of residency. Ethan had been thrilled, but his mother wasn't. "You're not one of us," she had said coldly over lunch, her voice sharp enough to draw blood. Then came the accident. A rainy night on Highway 1. Ethan was driving, the car spun out, and I woke up in the hospital days later, bruised, broken, and alone. Victoria was the first person I saw. She told me Ethan was in a coma and that my baby hadn't survived. I remember screaming, begging to see him, but she just pressed her manicured hand over mine and whispered, "It's better not to." I believed her. I didn't know that I was bearing a lie. Now, almost a decade later, she was back, watching as I prepared to save a boy's life. I looked at the chart again. Lucas Hale. The name hit me like a storm. 9 years old. Guardian. Victoria Hale. Not mother. Guardian. I stared at the form as if the letters might rearrange themselves into something that made sense. My chest tightened. Could it be? No. It was impossible. I forced my hands to stay steady as I called for the scalpel. "Team, we proceed with Plan A," I said, my voice clear and professional. "Dr. Rivera, you're assisting. Dr. Patel, monitor SEPs. Let's begin." The first incision cut through skin, then bone. Every movement had to be precise, delicate, timed. The suction hummed, the monitors beeped in rhythm, and the world narrowed to the few inches beneath my hands. Halfway through, I leaned closer to adjust the retractor and froze. Just behind the boy's left ear was a tiny birthmark, a brown comma-shaped curve. My breath hitched. My son was supposed to have a mark like that. I had seen it on the ultrasound, a dark crescent just below the skull. I remembered tracing it with my finger on the scan, smiling, promising to protect him. My vision blurred. "Dr. Cole," Dr. Rivera whispered beside me. "Are you all right?" I blinked hard. "Yes," I said quietly. "I'm fine. Keep suction steady." 2 hours later, the clot was gone. The bleeding stopped. His vitals stabilized. Relief rippled through the room as we began to close. When the last suture was tied, I exhaled for what felt like the first time in hours. The boy would live, but the question pounding in my head refused to quiet. Who was he really? Outside the OR, Victoria was waiting, flanked by 2 lawyers and a hospital administrator. Her expression didn't change when she saw me. She clasped her pearls, nodded once, and said in her calm, icy voice, "Thank you, Dr. Cole. You've done a remarkable job." I took off my gloves. "Who is his mother?" I asked. Her lips curved just enough to show satisfaction. "He's mine," she said. I wanted to scream. I wanted to drag her into the OR and demand she tell me everything. But instead, I turned and walked away. I went straight to the scrub room and washed my hands until the hot water ran cold. The smell of antiseptic filled my lungs, grounding me just enough to stand. Then I left the hospital, drove through the city in silence, and parked in front of my townhouse in Pacific Heights. Inside, I locked the door and headed to my office. In the bottom drawer of my desk was a small shoebox wrapped in a faded blue ribbon. I hadn't opened it in years. Inside were the pieces of a life I had buried, the ultrasound photo, a hospital bracelet that said Baby Cole, and a few crumpled letters I never sent. I lifted the photo and stared at the timestamp in the corner. Then I noticed something I hadn't before, a partial medical record number. My pulse quickened. I sat down, grabbed my phone, and called the one person I trusted with my life, Sophia Bennett, my closest friend and one of the best medical attorneys in California. When she picked up, I didn't waste time. "Sophia," I said, my voice trembling, "I think my son is alive." There was silence on the line, then her steady voice. "Madison, start from the beginning." So I did. I told her everything. The crash, the lies, the child named Lucas Hale, and the woman standing behind the glass. When I finished, she didn't hesitate. "We'll find the truth," she said. "Whatever it takes." I hung up, leaned back in my chair, and looked around my home. The shelves were lined with medical journals and awards, proof of everything I'd built on discipline and loss. But tonight, all of it felt small compared to the possibility that the child I thought I'd lost had been alive all along. As the city lights flickered through the window, I whispered to the quiet room, "I'm coming for you, my son." And for the first time in 9 years, I let myself believe it might be true. Sophia arrived at my house just before dusk, her laptop tucked under her arm and determination written across her face. My Victorian home in Pacific Heights had never felt so small. The pale gray walls and quiet hum of the city outside could not drown out the storm building inside me. She sat at my dining table, opened a yellow legal pad, and gave me the look she always used when she was about to break open something impossible. "Start with the crash," she said simply. I took a deep breath and began. I told her about the rain that night, how the car skidded across the slick road, how the world flipped, metal screamed, and glass shattered. I told her about the ambulance lights and the hospital ceiling I woke up to. Then about Victoria Hale, her perfume, her steady voice, the way she stood between me and every door that led to the maternity ward. She told me my baby died. I whispered. She wouldn't let me see him. Said it was better if I didn't. Said I wasn't strong enough. Sophia wrote everything down. Names, dates, hospitals. She didn't interrupt, not even once. Only when I stopped talking did she finally ask, "Do you remember signing anything?" I shook my head. Just a discharge form. I was barely conscious. They said I needed rest. I didn't even read it. She started typing, her fingers flying across the keyboard. Within minutes, she was deep in hospital records, pulling up archived medical data using the partial record number for my ultrasound. When she finally looked up, her expression had changed. "Madison, this file doesn't make sense," she said. "What do you mean?" "There's no death certificate. No record of a funeral home release. Just a placeholder entry. Infant. No disposition recorded. That's not how hospitals handle deceased newborns. There's a trail missing." I felt my pulse quicken. "What about the hospital foundation?" She clicked a few more times, then turned the screen toward me. A donation entry popped up, $25000, made on the same day as the crash. Donor, Hale Family Holdings LLC. The room went still. "That's not a coincidence," Sophia said. "That's a payoff." She dug deeper, pulling up court filings, guardianship records, and private medical notes. When she opened Lucas Hale's consent form, her brows furrowed. "This says Victoria is his guardian, not adoptive mother," she said. "There's no adoption decree, no family court record, nothing legal to tie her to him. It's a ghost trail." "Then how did she get him?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. Sophia scrolled through the files until she found a scanned letter written years ago by a private physician. It was brief, clinical, and cold. Mother unknown. Guardian, Victoria Hale. The letterhead was from a clinic once owned by the Hale family. The font was identical to that used by their lawyers. It made my stomach twist. "We need proof," Sophia said, closing her laptop. "DNA proof. Once we have that, no one can bury this again." I nodded. But that could take weeks with court orders and bureaucracy. Then we don't wait. At dawn, I called a friend from medical school, Dr. Alan Price, now a senior pathologist at the hospital. He owed me a favor from a malpractice review I helped him navigate years ago. I didn't tell him everything, only that I needed a secure DNA swab with full chain of custody documentation. He hesitated but agreed to meet me at 6. By 5:30 a.m., I was in the hospital parking lot, the fog curling around the headlights like smoke. The world was quiet except for the rhythmic hum of distant traffic. Inside, the pediatric ICU was still. Lucas slept peacefully, a small teddy bear tucked under his arm. The sight of him sent a tremor through me, his chest rising and falling, his fingers curled lightly around the edge of his blanket. "I'm just checking vitals," I told the night nurse. She nodded, trusting me completely. I examined his pupils, checked his reflexes, and whispered words he couldn't hear. Then Dr. Price entered, silent and serious. He collected the swab quickly, sealing it in a sterile envelope with my initials across the tape. Everything was done by the book, because one day, every detail would matter. When I stepped into the hallway, the world shifted again. Ethan Hale was standing there. He looked older, his once boyish face sharper, lined with guilt. His dark hair was shorter now, streaked with gray. The last time I had seen him, he was covered in blood and glass. Now, he wore a navy suit, every button fastened, every word stuck in his throat. "Madison," he said softly. My name broke in his voice. I couldn't move. "Where were you?" He swallowed hard. "After the crash, I was in rehab. My mother told me the baby didn't make it. She said you wanted nothing to do with me. She said it was too painful for you." "She lied," I said flatly. "She lied to both of us." He nodded, tears forming but never falling. "When I got out, she sent me to London to manage a branch company. Said it was for my recovery. I believed her. God, Madison, I believed her." "I painted a room yellow," I said quietly. "I waited by the door for months. Every time a car stopped outside, I thought it was you, or someone telling me there'd been a mistake. But no one came." Ethan's voice trembled. "If I'd known—" "It's too late for that," I said. But not too late for him. He turned toward the glass, watching Lucas sleep. "Can he walk again?" "If his brain heals the way I expect, yes. It'll take therapy, but he's strong." He nodded slowly. "Then we fix this. Whatever it takes." "You're ready to go against your mother?" I asked. He looked me straight in the eye. "I'm ready to burn down everything she built if it means giving you back what she stole." For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The only sound was the steady beeping from inside the ICU. Then my phone buzzed. It was Sophia. I answered. "Tell me you have something." Her voice came through steady, but electrified. "The DNA match is almost complete. Madison, it's a 99.9% probability. He's your son." My knees went weak. I gripped the phone, staring at the child sleeping behind the glass. My child. Sophia took a breath. "We file tomorrow. Brace yourself. This is going to get loud." I ended the call and stood in silence, my heart pounding like a drum. The truth was no longer buried. Victoria Hale had stolen my child. Now I was taking him back. The court hearing was set for Friday morning, but by Wednesday, Sophia had already secured a temporary injunction preventing Lucas's release from the hospital. The order also froze all medical records linked to his birth, cutting off Victoria Hale's access to them. It was the first time in years that the powerful Hale family had been denied anything, and it rattled her. I could feel it. The next day, Sophia called me into her office downtown. Her voice was clipped, her energy sharp. "We need leverage," she said. "Before the hearing. Before her lawyers start rewriting history." She leaned across her desk. "We confront her. Not in court, not through letters. Face to face. On your terms. I hesitated, then nodded. Let's do it. By noon, we were on Highway 101 heading south toward Atherton. My old silver SUV rattled slightly at high speed, still carrying the faint scent of lemon wipes I used to clean it every Sunday. It was a humble car compared to the sleek Teslas and Range Rovers that filled the driveways of Silicon Valley estates. When we reached the Hale residence, my stomach twisted. The property stretched over 2 acres, modern architecture, all glass and steel, perfectly manicured lawns, and a koi pond the size of a swimming pool. The house shimmered in the California sun like something built to reflect wealth rather than shelter people. A woman in a black suit escorted us into a white room lined with glass walls and marble floors. Everything inside gleamed, cold, expensive, immaculate. The kind of place where even emotions would echo. We waited for less than a minute before Victoria Hale entered, her heels clicking against the marble like punctuation. She carried her phone in one hand and a faint smile on her face. She sat at the long table and set her phone down carefully, as if it were a weapon. "Dr. Cole," she greeted me. "I suppose congratulations are in order. You've been very persistent." I met her gaze, steady and unblinking. "You stole my child," I said. No anger, no tremor, just truth. Her smile didn't fade. "I saved him," she replied. "You were broken. My son was a disaster. Someone had to step in. I gave Lucas everything: safety, education, stability. Tutors, private schools, fencing lessons. He's fluent in French. He's worth more than $5 million in trust assets. What exactly could you have offered him?" Sophia spoke before I could. "His mother," she said. "You didn't save him. You kidnapped him. You bribed a hospital foundation $25,000 the night he disappeared from the records. You forged medical letters. You made sure no court ever saw an adoption file. And now we have DNA proof." Victoria's eyes darkened, but her voice stayed smooth. "You're buying into a story, Miss Bennett. Everyone buys stories in this city. It's how reputations are made and destroyed." I reached into my bag and pulled out a small plastic evidence pouch. Inside was the faded hospital tag that read Baby Cole, with the date and time of birth, 9:42 p.m., January 12th. The same night of the crash. I placed it gently on the table. "I found this in a storage unit under my old apartment," I said. The box also held the gray hospital blanket and a medical bill with my name. The unit's rent was paid through a shell company that traced back to Hale Holdings. It stopped after 3 years. Guess who covered the final balance? She looked down at the tag, but didn't touch it. Instead, she lifted her phone and spoke 4 cold words into it. "Prepare for a settlement." Sophia leaned forward. "We're not here to negotiate," she said. "We're here to give you one last chance to do this with an ounce of dignity. Bring us the nurse who signed the forged discharge letter, the administrator who altered the records. Sign a statement admitting that you misrepresented the child's parentage. If you do, we'll recommend leniency in court." Victoria laughed softly, the sound like glass cracking. "Do you really think you can frighten me? I've handled senators, CEOs, and judges. You..." She looked at me with a mix of disdain and curiosity. "You're a surgeon with a savior complex. You think cutting brains makes you powerful. I think cutting lies out of people like you makes me stronger," I said. "You took everything from me. You don't get to rewrite what you stole." She stood slowly, turning toward the koi pond beyond the glass wall. The fish shimmered beneath the water, flashes of red and gold like spilled paint. "You weren't supposed to survive that crash," she murmured. "You were in a coma for 3 days. I made a choice. The child was better off." "You made that choice for yourself," I said. "Not for him." At that moment, the door opened. Ethan stepped in. He looked different from the man who had stood in the hospital hallway, less like the broken son, and more like someone ready to face the wreckage of his past. He didn't say a word at first. He just looked between us, then at the small bag with the baby tag on the table. "Mom," he said finally, his voice steady but quiet, "is it true?" She hesitated, just long enough for him to know the answer. Ethan took a slow breath. "Then I'm done," he said. "I'm done protecting you. I'll testify for Madison. I'll tell the court everything. I'll even cover her legal fees if I have to. I'm moving out today. The condo in Soma is in my name. I'll sign whatever papers Sophia needs." Victoria turned, disbelief flashing in her eyes. "You would turn on your own mother?" "I'm turning toward the truth," he said. "For once." She stared at him, speechless. For years, she had controlled every room she entered. Now, her empire of silence was cracking. I gathered my bag and stood. "You told me once I wasn't one of you," I said. "You were right. I never wanted to be." As Sophia and I walked toward the exit, I glanced back through the glass. Victoria was still standing there, staring at the koi pond, her reflection fractured across the surface. For the first time, she looked small, like a queen who had miscounted her soldiers and lost her crown without realizing it. Outside, the sun hit the car windshield. Sophia exhaled slowly. "That," she said, "was the sound of a dynasty falling." But I wasn't thinking about dynasties. I was thinking about a little boy with a comma-shaped birthmark behind his ear, waiting in a hospital bed for a truth that would change his life forever. And this time, I wasn't going to let anyone take him from me again. The hearing took nearly the entire day. Reporters waited on the courthouse steps, their cameras pointed like weapons, the air thick with the hum of whispered speculation. Inside, the tension was unbearable. The judge, a gray-haired woman with a steady gaze, listened as Sophia presented the evidence, the falsified documents, the financial transfers, and, finally, the DNA results. The room fell silent as the clerk read the words that rewrote my entire life. Probability of maternity greater than 99.99%. My hands trembled when I signed my statement, each stroke of ink both liberation and grief. Ethan testified next. His voice, steady and low, filled the courtroom with a quiet sincerity that no amount of wealth or influence could buy. "We both believed a lie," he said, his eyes never leaving mine. "But now that the truth is here, I'll spend the rest of my life making it right." Victoria sat across the aisle, poised as ever, her face unreadable. She didn't flinch when the judge announced her decision: temporary joint custody, with physical placement in my home once Lucas was discharged from the hospital. She would also face a criminal inquiry for falsifying medical records, obstruction, and unlawful guardianship. It wasn't everything, but it was justice beginning to breathe. Outside, rain streaked down the courthouse steps. I inhaled the scent of wet concrete and freedom. Sophia stood beside me, calm and exhausted, a faint smile on her lips. "You did it," she said quietly. I shook my head. "No," I whispered. "We did it." The next morning, I went to the hospital. Lucas was awake, propped up in bed with a book open on his lap. When he saw me, he smiled, a small, tired smile, but real. "You came back," he said. "Always," I replied. "You're coming home today." The nurse helped me pack his things, clothes, medications, and a few toys from the hospital's playroom. When we walked out of the unit, every nurse we passed smiled. Some nodded knowingly, their eyes shining. They all knew what had happened, though none said a word. Outside, the air smelled of spring and new beginnings. Lucas held my hand as we crossed the parking lot, his grip small but sure. When we reached my SUV, he looked up at me. "Where do you live?" "In a house I bought 3 years ago," I said. "It's waiting for you." The drive home was quiet. He stared out the window, watching the city glide past, the bay, the bridges, the rows of Victorian homes stacked against the hills. When we pulled up to my house, he blinked at it. "It's tall," he said softly. I laughed, tears catching in my throat. "I guess it is." Inside, I led him up the stairs and stopped at the door I hadn't opened in years. My hand hesitated on the knob. The yellow paint had faded, but the light still pooled inside like sunlight trapped in a memory. "This was your room," I said quietly. He stepped in slowly, his eyes wide. The walls glowed a soft golden hue, warm against the late afternoon light. There was a new bed, larger, solid oak, covered with blue and white sheets, and a desk by the window with art supplies neatly arranged. A basket of Lego bricks sat on the rug. A framed photo of the ocean hung above the dresser. Lucas walked to the wall and placed his small hand against it. "It feels warm," he whispered. "It is," I said. "It belongs to you." That evening Ethan came by. He brought a chess set, a stack of children's books, and that same quiet energy that had once drawn me to him. Lucas's eyes lit up when Ethan walked in. He didn't know him as his father yet, just as someone who cared. But I could see the connection forming, small and steady, like a bridge being rebuilt one plank at a time. Ethan stayed for dinner. We ordered pizza, laughed when Lucas got sauce on his shirt, and listened as he talked about the things he loved: rockets, animals, building things. It felt unreal, sitting at that table, hearing my son's laughter fill the house I'd once believed would never be home to anyone but me. Later, after Lucas fell asleep, Ethan and I stood in the doorway of his room. The lamp cast a soft glow across the yellow walls. "You kept it," Ethan said quietly. "I couldn't let it go," I admitted. "It was all I had of him." He nodded, his voice low. "You gave him a piece of hope to come back to." The following months blurred into a rhythm of healing and rebuilding. Lucas began therapy and physical rehab, learning to regain his balance and strength. He also began to ask questions, the kind that made my heart ache. Why did she take me? Did you look for me? Did Daddy know? I answered each one honestly, though sometimes my voice broke. I told him that some people hurt others when they think they're helping. That love can be twisted into control. And that I never stopped believing he was somewhere out there, even when I was told not to hope. The criminal case against Victoria unfolded slowly. The nurse who signed the falsified discharge letter took a plea deal and revealed everything: the meeting in the back office, the cash payment, the threats. The hospital administrator resigned and testified, confirming that Victoria had paid to have records altered. The court froze her assets and ordered the sale of her estate in Atherton. The newspapers turned it into a scandal. Heir kidnapped by grandmother. $5 million trust in question. But the headlines couldn't capture the truth of what had been taken from us. Years. Memories. First words. First steps. Those things have no market value. By summer, the air grew softer, the city humming with life again. Lucas was thriving. He loved his school, his friends, and his small golden retriever puppy, Milo, who followed him everywhere. One morning, he came into the kitchen while I was making pancakes and asked if we could repaint his room blue. "Blue?" I asked, smiling. "Why blue?" He shrugged. "Because yellow was your dream. Blue can be ours." I laughed and handed him the whisk. "Then blue it is." That night, after Lucas was asleep, Ethan and I walked the block under the streetlights. We didn't hold hands. We didn't make promises. We talked about practical things: school events, legal updates, and the best bike route to the park. We talked like two people who had walked through fire and were learning how to live again. When we got back, I stood in the doorway of Lucas's room. The light from the hallway stretched across the faded yellow wall. I reached out and touched it, the paint warm under my palm. People ask if I've forgiven her. The truth is, forgiveness isn't a single act. It's not a bill you pay once and walk away. It's something you build, layer by layer, like a scar that no longer hurts but still remembers. I saved a child that day in the operating room, but that child also saved me. I built this life with my own hands, in a city that can be cruel and kind in the same breath. I kept a room ready. I left a light on. And at last, the person I waited for walked through my door and asked to stay. Top of form. Bottom of form.